In 1875, in a quiet stretch of California farmland near Maricopa, a local rancher named James Anderson was digging a well. The earth was dry, cracked, the kind of soil that resists every shovel strike. But about 20 feet down, his shovel hit something that wasn't rock. He pulled up what looked like a massive tooth. Curved, sharp, nearly 8 inches long from root to tip. At first, Anderson thought it was from a bear. Maybe a grizzly that died in some long, forgotten drought. But when he showed it to a local geologist, the man went pale. This wasn't a bear tooth. The curvature was wrong. The serrations along the edge were too fine. And the size, well, the size suggested something that shouldn't exist. What Anderson had found was a canine tooth from Smilodon fatalis, one of the most famous extinct predators in North American history. The saber-toothed cat. Now, if you've ever seen a museum display or watched a documentary about the Ice Age, you've probably heard Smilodon called a saber-toothed tiger. It's in textbooks. It's in movies. It's embedded in popular culture. But here's the thing. Smilodon wasn't a tiger. It wasn't even particularly close to a tiger. In fact, calling it a tiger is like calling a dolphin a shark. Just because they both live in the ocean and have fins, the resemblance is superficial, under the surface. These animals are fundamentally different creatures, shaped by wildly different evolutionary pressures. So why does this matter? Why does it matter that we've been calling Smilodon the wrong thing for over a century? Well, because when you misunderstand what an animal is, you misunderstand how it lived, how it hunted, and why it ultimately vanished. And Smilodon's story, the real story, is far stranger and more fascinating than any tiger comparison could ever convey. So let's start with the basics. What was Smilodon? When did it live? And how do we even know it existed? The discovery of Smilodon. The first scientifically described Smilodon fossil came from Brazil in 1842. A Danish naturalist named Peter Wilhelm Lund was exploring limestone caves near Lagoa Santa when he stumbled upon an enormous collection of Ice Age bones. Among them were massive jaw fragments with those unmistakable curved teeth. Lund named it Smilodon populator, literally, chisel tooth, and recognized it as something distinct from modern cats. But it wasn't until decades later, when fossils started emerging from the La Breatar pits in Los Angeles, that scientists truly understood just how common and widespread these animals were. The La Breatar pits are one of the richest Ice Age fossil sites on Earth. Over the past century, paleontologists have pulled out more than 166,000 individual specimens from the tar. And among those specimens, saber-toothed cats are by far the most abundant predator. In fact, scientists have recovered over 2,000 individual Smilodon specimens from La Brea alone. That's not 2,000 bones. That's 2,000 individual animals, some nearly complete skeletons. It's an absurd treasure trove of data. So here's the question. If Smilodon was so successful, so abundant, why did it go extinct? And why isn't there anything like it alive today? To answer that, we need to understand what Smilodon actually was. And that starts with its classification. What Smilodon really was. Smilodon belongs to the family Felidae, the same family that includes all modern cats, from house cats to lions to tigers. So yes, it was a cat, but that's where the easy comparisons end. Within Felidae, There are two major subfamilies. The first is feline, which includes most of the cats you're familiar with. Lions, tigers, leopards, cougars, lynxes, house cats. These are sometimes called the purring cats, though that's a bit of a misnomer since lions and tigers can't actually purr. The second subfamily is pantherinae, which includes the big roaring cats, lions, tigers, leopards, and jaguars. These cats have a specialized larynx that allows them to roar but prevents them from purring continuously like smaller cats can. But Smilodon didn't belong to either of these groups. Smilodon belonged to a completely separate and now extinct subfamily called Machaerodontidae, the saber-toothed cats. This group split off from the main cat lineage around 20 million years ago, long before modern tigers or lions even existed. Think about it this way. The evolutionary distance between Smilodon and a modern tiger is roughly the same as the distance between a modern lion and a modern house cat. They're related, sure. They share a common ancestor. But they've been on separate evolutionary paths for millions of years. So when you call Smilodon a tiger, you're not just being slightly inaccurate. You're collapsing 20 million years of evolutionary divergence into a single misleading label. When and where Smilodon lived, Smilodon first appeared in North America around 2.5 million years ago, during the early Pleistocene epoch. This was the beginning of the Ice Age, a time of massive climate swings, advancing glaciers, and rapidly shifting ecosystems. There were actually 3 recognized species of Smilodon, each with slightly different sizes and geographic ranges. First, Smilodon gracilis, the smallest and earliest species, appeared around 2.5 million years ago in the western United States. It was roughly the size of a modern jaguar, about 120 to 150 pounds, and had slightly shorter canines than its later relatives. Then came Smilodon fetalis, the most famous species and the one most commonly found at La Brea. It was larger, heavier, and more robust than gracilis, weighing between 350 and 620 pounds. It lived across much of North America and parts of South America, from Alaska down to Peru, and survived until about 10,000 years ago. And finally, there was Smilodon populator, the absolute giant of the group, found primarily in South America, especially in Argentina, Brazil, and Chile. Populator was one of the largest cats that ever lived. Estimates put it at 500 to 880 pounds, with some individuals possibly exceeding 1,000 pounds. For context, a modern Siberian tiger, the largest living cat, weighs around 600 pounds at the absolute maximum. So Smilodon populator was potentially 30 to 40% heavier than the biggest tigers alive today. But here's what's fascinating. Despite being heavier, Smilodon wasn't longer. It wasn't built like a tiger at all. Physical characteristics, built like a tank. So here's the question everyone wants to know. If Smilodon wasn't built like a tiger, what was it built like? Well, imagine taking a modern lion, compressing it, adding 200 pounds of muscle to its chest and shoulders, shortening its legs, and giving it the bite mechanics of a specialized predatory machine. That's closer to what Smilodon actually looked like. Let's start with the basics. Smilodon fetalis, the most well-studied species, had a shoulder height of about 3 to 3.5 feet, roughly the same as a modern lion. But its body was much more compact. Where a lion is long and lean, built for endurance running across open savannas, Smilodon was short and stocky, built for raw power. Its front legs were incredibly robust, much thicker and more muscular than a tiger's. The humerus, the upper arm bone, was shorter but significantly thicker, designed to support immense strain. The scapula, or shoulder blade, was also different. It was broader and positioned differently, giving Smilodon greater range of motion in its front limbs. Its hind legs, by contrast, were relatively shorter and less developed than those of modern big cats. This tells us something important. Smilodon wasn't chasing down prey over long distances. It wasn't built for speed. Modern cheetahs can hit 70 miles per hour. Lions can sprint at 50 miles per hour in short bursts. But biomechanical models suggest Smilodon probably topped out around 30 miles per hour, maybe less. For a predator its size, that's surprisingly slow. So if it wasn't fast, how did it hunt? We'll get to that. But first, we need to talk about the most iconic feature of Smilodon, the teeth. Those teeth, the iconic sabers, the upper canines of Smilodon fatalis were, on average, 7 inches long. That's measured from the root to the tip, including the part embedded in the skull. The exposed portion, the part you'd actually see, was about 4 to 5 inches. For comparison, a modern lion's canine tooth is about 3 inches long total. A tiger's is slightly longer, maybe 3.5 inches. So Smilodon's canines were more than twice as long. But it's not just the length, it's the shape. Smilodon's canines were thin, laterally compressed, and incredibly sharp. They had fine serrations along both edges, like a double-sided steak knife. These serrations helped the teeth slice cleanly through flesh and blood vessels. But here's the thing. Those teeth were also fragile. Modern big cats have thick, conical canines built to withstand massive bite forces. They can bite down on bone, crush vertebrae, and hold struggling prey without worrying about breaking their teeth. Smilodon couldn't do that. Fossilized Smilodon teeth show relatively low rates of breakage, considering how many specimens we have. But when they did break, it was catastrophic. A broken saber-tooth didn't grow back. And for a predator whose entire hunting strategy revolved around those teeth, losing one was probably a death sentence. So here's the obvious question. If the teeth were so fragile, how did Smilodon use them? The jaw and bite mechanics. For decades, scientists debated exactly how Smilodon delivered the killing bite. Some suggested it bit like a modern cat, using its jaw muscles to drive the teeth into prey. Others argued that was impossible given the tooth structure. Modern research, using biomechanical modeling and computer simulations, has settled the debate. And the answer is surprising. Smilodon had one of the weakest bite forces of any large predatory cat. Now that sounds absurd. How could a 600-pound apex predator have a weak bite? But here's the thing. It didn't need a strong bite. Smilodon's jaw could open to an angle of about 120 degrees, nearly twice as wide as a modern lion's 65-degree gape. This extraordinary gape was made possible by modifications to the jaw joint and reduced attachment points for the temporalis muscles, the muscles that control biting force. A modern lion can generate a bite force of around 1,000 pounds per square inch. A tiger can hit 150 psi. Smilodon, probably only around 400 to 600 psi, closer to a leopard than a lion. But Smilodon didn't bite down. It stabbed. The killing blow came from the neck and shoulder muscles, not the jaw. Once Smilodon had pinned its prey, using those incredibly powerful front limbs, it would hyperextend its jaw, position those saber teeth over a vital area like the throat or neck, and then drive them downward using the force of its entire upper body. The teeth would slice through soft tissue, severing major blood vessels and causing rapid blood loss. Death would come in seconds, not minutes. It was brutal, precise, and terrifyingly effective. The hunting strategy, so here's the next question. What did Smilodon hunt? And how did it catch its prey? Smilodon lived alongside some of the largest herbivores of the Pleistocene. We're talking about massive animals. Ground sloths weighing up to 3 tons, bison weighing 500 pounds, camels, horses, young mammoths, and mastodons. Fossil evidence from La Brea shows that Smilodon likely focused on large, slow-moving prey. Isotope analysis of Smilodon teeth suggests it primarily hunted herbivores like bison, horses, and camels. Animals that were abundant in the late Pleistocene, but too large for smaller predators to reliably take down. Modern lions hunt by chasing prey over open ground, using teamwork and endurance to exhaust their target before bringing it down. Smilodon couldn't do that. It was too slow, too heavy, and its body wasn't built for sustained running. So what did it do instead? Most likely, Smilodon was an ambush predator. It would have hidden in dense vegetation or near water sources, waiting for prey to wander close. Then, in a sudden explosive burst, it would charge, covering maybe 20 or 30 feet in a few seconds, and tackle its prey to the ground. This is where those massive front limbs come into play. Smilodon's shoulders and forelimbs were built to grapple. It would have used its body weight and strength to wrestle large prey to the ground, pin it, and then deliver that precise stabbing bite to the throat or neck. The prey wouldn't have had time to struggle. The bite would sever the carotid artery or jugular vein, and the animal would bleed out in seconds. Clean, efficient, and highly specialized. But here's the problem. This hunting strategy only works if you have the right kind of prey. And as the climate began to change, the prey began to disappear. The environment, a world of giants. To understand Smilodon, you have to understand the world it lived in. The late Pleistocene, between 2.5 million and 10,000 years ago, was a time of extremes. Massive ice sheets covered much of North America and Europe. Sea levels were hundreds of feet lower than they are today. And in between the glaciers, vast stretches of open grassland and mixed woodland stretched across the continents. North America, in particular, was teeming with megafauna, giant animals that make modern wildlife look small by comparison. There were Columbian mammoths standing 13 feet tall at the shoulder, American mastodons weighing 10 tons, giant ground sloths that could rear up on their hind legs and browse from tree branches 15 feet off the ground. There were also short-faced bears, the largest land predators of the era, weighing up to 800 pounds. Dire wolves, which hunted in packs and competed directly with Smilodon for prey. American lions, which were actually larger than modern African lions. And scimitar cats, close relatives of Smilodon with shorter, blade-like teeth. This was Smilodon's ecosystem, a world of giants, constant competition, and rapidly shifting climates. And for millions of years, Smilodon thrived in it. Social behavior. Did Smilodon hunt in groups? One of the big debates among paleontologists is whether Smilodon was a solitary hunter or a social animal that lived and hunted in groups. The evidence is mixed. On one hand, modern big cats show a clear pattern. Lions are social, tigers are solitary, leopards are solitary, jaguars are solitary. The general rule is that cats living in open habitats with large prey tend to be social, while cats in dense forests or with smaller prey tend to be solitary. Smilodon lived in relatively open habitats and hunted large prey, two factors that would favor social behavior. And the La Brea tar pits provide an interesting clue. The tar pits were natural traps. An animal would get stuck in the sticky asphalt, struggle, and its distress would attract predators. Those predators would then get stuck too, creating a feedback loop that trapped hundreds of animals over thousands of years. And here's the thing, Saber-Toothed cats are by far the most common predators found in the tar. We found over 2,000 individual Smilodon specimens compared to just one scimitar cat and about 4,000 dire wolves. So why would so many saber-toothed cats get trapped? One possibility is that they were social, living in groups. And when one got stuck, others came to investigate or scavenge and got trapped themselves. But that's speculative. We don't have definitive proof. What we do know is that Smilodon's body wasn't built for cooperative hunting the way lions are. It didn't need to run down prey over long distances, which is where pack hunting really shines. So the most likely scenario, Smilodon was probably somewhere in between. Perhaps loosely social, living in small family groups or pairs, but not forming the large coordinated prides that modern lions do. Reproduction and lifespan. We don't know much about Smilodon's reproductive behavior because soft tissue doesn't fossilize. But we can make educated guesses based on modern big cats. Modern lions reach sexual maturity around 3 to 4 years of age. Tigers are similar. If Smilodon followed the same pattern, it probably reached maturity around the same time, maybe slightly later given its larger size. Atone, normal volume. Matter of fact, steady pace. Gestation for big cats is typically around 100 to 110 days. Litter sizes range from 1 to 4 cubs, with 2 to 3 being most common. Smilodon likely followed a similar pattern. One interesting piece of evidence comes from fossilized juvenile Smilodon specimens. These show that the saber teeth didn't fully develop until the animal was about 2 to 3 years old. Until then, young Smilodon had shorter, more typical cat-like teeth. This suggests that young Smilodon stayed with their mothers for an extended period, learning to hunt and surviving on meat provided by adults until their sabers were fully grown. That's a long period of dependency, which would limit how quickly populations could reproduce. As for lifespan, modern lions live about 10 to 14 years in the wild. Tigers live 10 to 15 years. Smilodon was probably similar, maybe slightly longer given that it wasn't running down prey and putting as much stress on its joints and bones. The science behind saber teeth. So here's a deeper question. Why did saber teeth evolve at all? What advantage did they provide that normal cat teeth didn't? Well, here's the fascinating part. Saber teeth didn't evolve just once. They evolved independently, multiple times, in completely unrelated carnivores. You had saber-toothed marsupials in South America, like Thalicus milis, which looked eerily similar to Smilodon, but weren't even placental mammals. You had nimravids, or false saber-toothed cats, which lived tens of millions of years before true saber-toothed cats and weren't closely related to them at all. You even had saber-toothed creodont mammals in the Eocene. So clearly, saber teeth were an effective solution to some ecological problem. But what problem? The leading hypothesis is that saber teeth are an adaptation for killing very large prey with thick hides and heavy musculature. Modern big cats kill by biting the throat and suffocating their prey, or by crushing the vertebrae at the back of the neck. But that strategy doesn't work well on animals that are much larger than you. A 500-pound Smilodon trying to suffocate a 3,000-pound bison would get crushed. So instead, Smilodon used its teeth like surgical blades, slicing through vital blood vessels and causing rapid blood loss without needing to overpower the prey through sheer jaw strength. It's the same reason why humans use spears and knives to hunt large animals, instead of trying to wrestle them to the ground. Precision and penetration matter more than raw force when you're dealing with something bigger than yourself. Metabolism and daily life, like all cats, Smilodon was almost certainly a warm-blooded mammal with a high metabolic rate. This means it needed a lot of food to maintain its body temperature and muscle mass. A modern lion needs to eat about 10 to 15 pounds of meat per day, though they often go several days between kills and then gorge on 60 to 70 pounds in one sitting. A tiger has similar requirements. Smilodon, being similarly sized to a lion but more heavily muscled, probably needed around 15 to 20 pounds of meat per day, given that it hunted large prey, animals weighing thousands of pounds. A single kill could have sustained an individual or small group for a week or more. But here's the challenge. Hunting large prey is risky. A bison or ground sloth could easily kill Smilodon with a well-placed kick. And with relatively slow speed and reliance on ambush tactics, Smilodon probably had a lower hunting success rate than modern cursorial predators like lions. This means Smilodon likely spent a lot of time resting, conserving energy between hunts, much like modern big cats, which spend 16 to 20 hours per day sleeping or resting. The beginning of the end. So if Smilodon was such a successful predator, perfectly adapted to its environment, why isn't it still around? Well, the answer is both simple and tragic. The world changed, and Smilodon couldn't. Around 12,000 years ago, the Earth began to warm rapidly. The massive ice sheets that had covered North America and Europe for millions of years started to retreat. Sea levels rose. Grasslands dried up or turned into forests. And most critically, the megafauna began to disappear. This period is known as the Quaternary Extinction event, one of the largest die-offs of large mammals in Earth's history. Within a span of just a few thousand years, more than 80% of North America's large mammals went extinct. Mammoths, mastodons, ground sloths, giant beavers, short-faced bears, dire wolves, American lions, scimitar cats, all gone. And with them went Smilodon. Why couldn't Smilodon adapt? So here's the question. Why couldn't Smilodon just switch to hunting smaller prey? Why didn't it adapt? Well, evolution doesn't work that way. Smilodon wasn't a generalist. It was a specialist, finely tuned over millions of years to hunt large, slow-moving herbivores in open or semi-open habitats. Its entire body plan, the stocky build, the powerful shoulders, the fragile saber teeth, the wide gape, the relatively weak bite force. All of it was optimized for one specific hunting strategy. And when that strategy stopped working, Smilodon had nowhere to go. Modern big cats, by contrast, are generalists. Lions hunt everything from warthogs to buffalo. Tigers hunt deer, wild boar, and even fish. Jaguars hunt capybaras, caimans, and tapirs. They're adaptable. Smilodon couldn't hunt smaller, faster prey. Its body was too heavy, too slow. Its teeth were too fragile to risk on smaller animals that could fight back or escape. And its hunting technique required prey that could be pinned and restrained. So when the megafauna disappeared, Smilodon's food source vanished, and it simply couldn't retool its entire body, plan fast enough to survive. The role of humans. Now, there's an ongoing debate about how much humans contributed to the quaternary extinction event. Some scientists argue that climate change alone was enough to wipe out the megafauna. Others point to evidence of human hunting and suggest that the arrival of humans in North America around 15,000 years ago was the final nail in the coffin. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Climate change stressed the megafauna populations, reducing their numbers and making them more vulnerable. And then humans, armed with sophisticated hunting tools and working in coordinated groups, finished the job by overhunting the remaining populations. There's no evidence that humans hunted Smilodon directly, but they didn't need to. By eliminating Smilodon's prey base, humans indirectly caused its extinction. So in a way, Smilodon was a casualty of two forces, one natural, one human-made, both of which fundamentally reshaped the ecosystems of the Pleistocene. What Smilodon's extinction tells. A Smilodon's extinction is a cautionary tale about specialization. When conditions are stable and your niche is secure, being a specialist is incredibly effective. Smilodon dominated its ecosystem for millions of years because it was better at killing large prey than any other predator. But when conditions change, when the climate shifts, when prey populations collapse, when new competitors arrive, specialists are the first to go. They can't pivot. They can't adapt quickly enough. This is why modern big cats are all generalists to some degree. They survived the quaternary extinction event precisely because they were flexible enough to adjust their diets, hunting strategies, and habitats. And it's a lesson that applies to the modern world as well. As human activity continues to reshape ecosystems, drive climate change, and push species to the brink, the specialists, the animals that depend on very specific conditions, are the ones most at risk. The legacy of Smilodon. So what's the legacy of Smilodon? What does this extinct predator tell us about evolution, adaptation, and survival? Well, Smilodon reminds us that being perfectly adapted to your environment is both a strength and a weakness. It reminds us that evolution doesn't plan for the future. It can only respond to the present. And it reminds us that no matter how successful a species is, no matter how dominant, it's always one environmental shift away from extinction. But Smilodon also teaches us something about the richness of evolutionary experimentation. Saber-Tooth evolved independently in multiple lineages because they solved a real ecological problem. They were a brilliant adaptation. Just one that ultimately couldn't survive the collapse of the Pleistocene megafauna. And in the end, that's okay. Extinction is a natural part of the evolutionary process. Over 99% of all species that have ever existed are now extinct. Smilodon had its moment, 2.5 million years of success, and then it bowed out. What remains are bones, teeth, and the imprint of an animal so unique, so specialized, that nothing like it exists today. Final thoughts? Why names matter? So let's come back to where we started. Why does it matter that we call Smilodon a saber-toothed cat instead of a saber-toothed tiger? Well, because names shape how we think about things. When you call something a tiger, you're implicitly suggesting it behaves like a tiger, hunts like a tiger, lives like a tiger. And Smilodon did none of those things. Smilodon was its own thing. A highly specialized ambush predator, built to wrestle and stab megafauna in the open grasslands and woodlands of the Pleistocene. It was short, stocky, and immensely powerful. It couldn't run fast, couldn't climb trees, and couldn't adapt when its world fell apart. Tigers, on the other hand, are versatile, solitary stalkers that hunt in dense forests and can take down prey ranging from deer to buffalo. They're still here because they're generalists. So no, Smilodon wasn't a tiger. It was something far stranger, far more fascinating, and ultimately, far more vulnerable. And maybe that's the real lesson. The most perfectly adapted creatures aren't always the ones that survive. Sometimes, it's the adaptable ones, the flexible ones, the ones that can roll with the punches when the world changes. Smilodon was a creature that should never have existed. It was too specialized, too dependent on a world that was always destined to change. But for a brief moment in Earth's history, 2.5 million years of ice, giants, and endless grasslands, all the conditions aligned perfectly. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving behind only bones and questions. All right, before I let you go, I want to talk about something that always feels a little awkward, but it matters. Creating these videos is a labor of love. Every script takes weeks of research, fact-checking, and writing. And what I want more than anything is to push this channel further. Richer visuals, deeper research, stories that truly make you stop and wonder. But quality takes time. And time is hard to come by when you're doing this alone. That's why I'm launching channel memberships. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel. You're buying me the time to create bigger, better documentaries. Time to dig deeper into the science, to craft more compelling narratives, to make videos that are worth your attention. So if you believe in this mission, if you want to see more of these deep dives into the natural world, please consider clicking the join button below. I literally exist because of you. Thank you. And until next time, there's another video here that I think you'll love.